Butterflies. Aren't they lovely? Fly from flower to flower. One of those beautiful things that we see on this beautiful planet. Aren't they great? They're great until they're in your tummy, and then butterflies are probably the worst thing in the world. These butterflies are also known as fear.
The only two fears we are born with as human beings are the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. Think about it. Nobody appreciates this. Every other fear you have was taught to you by some outside environmental force.
All right, everyone. So we all know we have fears, but fortunately, there are some ways we can actually overcome those fears. So one way we can overcome our fears is we can expose ourselves to the fear over and over again until it's not so bad anymore. We gradually desensitize ourselves basically to the fear. An example for me growing up, my parents took me, it was the first roller coaster my parents really took me on, my first big one. And I was petrified of heights. My parents knew I was afraid of heights. I couldn't actually see the size of the roller coaster because you got inside the cart indoors. By the time we got to the very top, my cousin looked over to me. I was completely white. I was pale. I literally looked like the life had been sucked right out of me. And I was so afraid that as we started to go down the hill, I just put my face in my hands and started screaming like a little girl. I was scarred, and I thought I was scarred for life. To tell you how bad it was, I'm from Utah, and we have an amusement park here called Lagoon. I didn't actually go on the Colossus until I was 12 years old. I may have even been 13 years old. That's how bad it really was. What I found is the more I exposed myself to my fear of roller coasters, it actually became fun. It became joyful. I wasn't as afraid of it. Another example was my wife had a professor in college. He taught rock climbing. So it was a rock climbing class. And same thing, he grew up with a severe fear of heights. And to overcome that fear, he finally made the decision he was going to overcome it. So he applied for a job cleaning windows in high-rise buildings. Of all jobs, cleaning high-rise building windows. And what happened was every time he went to work, the more and more he exposed himself to the fear, the more he just became used to it. It wasn't a problem anymore for him. And eventually, he ended up teaching a rock climbing class. It became a passion for him. It became a source of joy and happiness. And the same thing will happen with your fears. The more you expose yourself to it, the less afraid you'll become. So I want to give you a challenge. Pick one or two things, whatever they are. It could be fear of dating, fear of public speaking, fear of spiders, whatever it is. And make a decision to expose yourself to that fear, whether it's once a week, once a day, once a month. And the more you do it, the less you'll be afraid of it. And the more you'll be able to overcome it.
Fear of the dark. Why do we fear the dark? It's just darkness. Since the time we were young, we've been told stories that monsters, aliens, scary, creepy, everything comes out when it's dark. This is not the case, however. Because first of all, none of those things are even real. Oh, yeah, that's right, they're not real. Sorry to burst your bubble. The thing that scares us most in the dark is our own imaginations, our own minds. We get so worked up by creating these images and scenes of terror and horror and just pain that we scare ourselves to death. People are terrified of the dark because of this. Your imagination is always going to be worse than what the reality is. So how do we cope with this fear that we've had taught to us since we were young? What can we do to face it and to beat it? First of all, we can sit there and observe it. If you sit in the dark for 30 seconds and just watch it, nothing is going to happen to you. You'll be fine. Nothing is going to happen. Is darkness in and of itself dangerous? No. Darkness has never, ever hurt anybody by itself. How can this relate to public speaking? I have never seen anybody get hurt from public speaking by itself. It cannot hurt you, just like darkness. So why are we scared to death of public speaking? Let what you feel as you are speaking or sitting in the dark teach you why you're scared so you know how to beat it. Just observe it. Watch it. Step out of yourself and just watch yourself. Watch your emotions and don't get caught up in them, and you'll be able to defeat them.
Another big thing we can do to understand our fears is to really look at our fears logically instead of emotionally, and to really dissect and understand the origin of our fears. For example, germophobic people have a big issue with germs, and a lot of people have, issues with germs. Don't use the same fork for multiple items of food, or don't drink off my cup, or don't use the straw I'm using. But if we think about it, how logical is that fear really? And then a lot of times you'll realize it's a pretty unlogical fear. It's more of an emotional fear. For example, if I was to take a lollipop and I was to go and have my neighbor's dog lick it, it would seem really gross. Like you wouldn't want that lollipop anymore because it would be, tainted or disgusting. But in reality, if you think about it, dog saliva is actually cleaner than humans, and it probably wouldn't taste any different. So if you think about it, it's not going to taste any different. You're not going to get sick from it. There's really nothing harmful that's going to happen to you because of it. But at the same time, we are still very scared of it because it seems disgusting. Emotionally, we feel freaked out, but in reality, logically, there's nothing really to be afraid of. Now, I'm not suggesting that you should go out and be eating lollipops that have been licked by dogs, and I'm not saying that's something that everyone should be comfortable with, because heck, I know I'm not. But what I am saying is when it comes to these little small scale things like drinking off of somebody else's straw, you can really look at this and understand that there's really not a lot to be afraid of. So, when it comes to things on a smaller scale, like somebody drinking out of the milk carton, we really should ask ourselves why that bothers so many people. When somebody goes and they just, pop open the milk and they just are drinking it straight out of the fridge, and, people usually go, ew, gross, other people have to drink out of that. But if we think about it, is it really that gross? Are you going to taste their germs? No. Are you going to get sick from their germs? No. There's really almost nothing wrong with doing that, but at the same time, emotionally, that's very frightening to us, but if we think about it logically, there's really nothing to be afraid of there. This is a lot like public speaking. If we really evaluate public speaking, we'll know that there's a lot of emotional fear that goes into public speaking. We all fear that. We all feel that fear, but there's not a lot of logical, hard fear that we really need to be afraid of. There's really nothing there that's truly a good reason to be frightened. It's just like drinking out of that milk carton after somebody else has already done it. It's emotionally frightening, but logically, it's really not anything to worry about.
So another way we can overcome our fears is we can visualize ourselves in that moment of our greatest fear, overcoming it. Seeing ourselves hitting the big shot, or delivering the perfect speech, or asking the girl out on a date and her saying yes. Whatever it is, visualizing yourself in that moment, in that situation that scares us, and seeing ourselves getting the perfect outcome. The outcome that if we could have wrote it ourselves, we would get. For me, an inspirational story of someone that did this perfectly and who does it over and over again is Arnold Schwarzenegger. Growing up, he saw a picture of a guy named Reg Park on a magazine, super famous bodybuilder and actor, and seeing that magazine just created a burning desire inside of him, and it became a blueprint for him. That magazine became a blueprint for the rest of his life of things that he wanted to achieve. And every time he would mention this dream to someone, they would tell me he was crazy. But every night he would stay awake, just thinking of his dream and seeing himself in that position, in that moment of action and success and the opportunity of success, a moment that most people would shy away from. that they'd be afraid of, and they'd probably freeze up and not know how to react. He would see himself in those moments and create the perfect situation, the perfect outcome, seeing himself winning the competition, seeing himself getting elected. And we all know the outcome. He became a world famous champion bodybuilder, world famous actor, became governor of California, and he just created a life of success all by visualizing himself in those moments overcoming that fear. So if you think of the one or two things or the few things that you're afraid of that give you most fear, and visualize yourself handling that fear. Same thing, it could be public speaking, it could be the asking the girl out on the date, whatever it is. If you just see yourself having the perfect outcome, you'll be able to overcome those fears when you're in that situation because your mind has already been there. So your body will just react for you.
We also fear things we don't understand. And we fear abnormally shaped, eight-legged creatures that climb up our walls and make webs, and they scare everybody. They bite us, giving us some of their DNA so we too can make webs and become more like them. Just kidding, that was just one guy. But seriously, spiders, so many people are afraid of spiders. But why? I'd be willing to bet that 75% of them never even have been bit by a spider. And if they have, they didn't even know it was a spider. They probably just thought it was a mosquito bite. They never even knew the spider was on them. Yeah, and then we're sitting at work and we look 50 yards to our left and scream in utter terror because there's a spider climbing up the wall that's not even going to do anything to us. Do you even understand what spiders, do you even understand spiders? Do you even know what that is, what it's going to do? Well, people say, yeah, well, it scares me and it hurts me, so I don't like it. It's because they don't understand it. The thing about it is, spiders are freaking cool. They build their houses and food comes. They're smart. This brings on a whole new meaning to the phrase, if you build it, food will come. They don't have to work for their food. It just comes, they wrap it up, they eat it, it's over. Becoming fascinated with our fears is a great way to cope with them. Once we truly understand our fears, then we can move past them. Next time you see a spider climbing on the wall, don't immediately just take your shoe off and throw it at the wall, completely missing, and then scream. Walk over to it. You don't have to get right in its face, but you can stay at a comfortable distance and just watch it. See what it does. See if it hurts you. Because it's not going to. Just watch it climb up the wall and watch it catch food or watch it do something and let it blow your mind. It's like ants. They can carry tons of weight compared to their body size. It's amazing. This relates to public speaking in that people don't understand what it is. I mean, they know what they're going to be doing, but they don't really understand why they're afraid of it. Once they get fascinated by it and study it and see the amazing things that people have done from public speaking, their lives will be changed and you will be able to cope with it in amazing ways.
So some of us have overcome a lot of these fears and we're willing to put ourselves out there and we're willing to try things. But how often do we apply for the job we think we can get or the internship we think we can get, when in reality, we could get a much better job. We could get the job we always dreamed of, the job we've always wanted, if we were only to try it. But a lot of us are too afraid to try because we don't think we're able to do that. So let's say you're out with your buddies, and in walks in a group of girls. There's a really, really pretty one. She's like a 10. There's a really ugly one. She's like a 2. And then there's one or two that are, like a 5 or a 6 that are pretty, but, nothing to write home about. So what do? Naturally, you set up your ugly friend with their ugly friend. That takes care of that problem. That's a given. But then you have some averagely pretty girls and you have one really pretty girl left. So which one's the hard girl to get? You would think it's the 10 because she's the pretty girl, right? That's where you're wrong. It's actually the 5 and the 6 that are hard to get because everyone's too scared to ask out the really pretty girl, so they're going for the average. So, if you go for number 10, chances are you're going to get her because nobody else is going to be willing to try. I had a friend once that went on a date with an incredibly gorgeous girl, and he was a pretty ugly dude. And we're all, how did that happen? You know, why do you see these ugly guys with these ugly girl or with these really pretty girls sometimes? And that's because they were one of the few people that had the confidence to ask her out. Because, and this girl that he went on a date with, she said that she hadn't been asked out in about a year, and she was gorgeous. And that was just because people were too afraid to ask her out. This is just like public speaking. A lot of times we think we better hold back, we better not make a joke, we better not do a little dance, we better not do any of those things because it's too scary, it's too big, it's too intimidating. But in reality, if we were to just go for it, if we were to go for the gusto, go big, it would probably pay off for us because people in the audience would appreciate something refreshing like a dance or a joke. So when you're public speaking, a lot of times you got to understand it's better to go big than to go in the middle. It's easier to get that 10, that perfect speech, than it is to give an average one.
Hey everybody, take it one step at a time and celebrate your victories.
That's right, just take it one step at a time, get better and better at facing your fears, and then go out, find your fear,
And face it!